Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, welcome to the program. It is a dreary day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we've got a very interesting show for you today. I have not one, but two guests coming in. That's very unusual.
Oh.
So at some point we're going to play musical chairs.
Okay.
You're going to...
I mean, in fact, the second guest is under here. You
Yeah,
can't.
yeah,
So I'm just going to, at some point, go down.
Well, this is the first guest, and he may look vaguely familiar because he's been on the program before, but it's been a while. His name is Dave Ninehouser, and he must have grown up at Saul Alinsky's knee. I don't know, because you're that kind of a guy. You're an activist.
Sure,
yeah?
Absolutely, sure.
If it ain't one thing, it's another.
If it ain't one thing, it's another. That's for sure.
And the last time we saw you, you were doing some great work around healthcare reform.
With George Ann Coulter. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Lots of didn't get single payer, but
hey,
we got something.
Well, what we're going to talk about today is a lot of the environment that makes progress so difficult. So that what we got is amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so. Yesterday, some of you gave me some incorrect information for which you have apologized abjectly, and that was that in the movie Back to the Future, Marty McFly, the kid...
It's 2015.
Yeah, I know. I was told yesterday that yesterday was the day that he flew into July, whatever yesterday was. October 20th. Whatever. But it wasn't true. It wasn't true.
What is the date?
It's in July of...
No, it's still October.
It's October, but it's 2015. So
it's coming up.
It's
close.
McFly lie that you had.
A McFly lie.
Full disclosure, I never saw the movie the whole way through.
Oh, my gosh.
No.
Okay. But so anyway, that's... Why did I bring that up? Oh, because... There is an anniversary coming up before that one, and it's a 75th anniversary of an event that blew the minds of, I suppose, millions of people in various ways. There were people whose minds were blown, and then there were people whose minds were blown that other people's minds were blown. And you, I hope, have heard what caused all this. It is the 75th anniversary of that extraordinary broadcast by an ingenious young Orson Welles.
24 years old, I think, at the time.
Was he 24?
Yeah.
And he had this great idea, I guess, around Halloween, right?
It was Halloween Eve.
Oh, okay.
Devil's Night.
Right. So, and on his show, they did this whole mock-up that we were being invaded by Martians, War of the Worlds. Mm-hmm. And they did it so well, I guess, that people tuning in literally thought that Martians had landed and were destroying New Jersey, and people were hysterical and running all over the place. And that anniversary is coming up, as we said, next week?
A week from today.
And this is what you do? You go from healthcare to Martian invasion anniversaries?
Well, specifically, we're working. That's a date that we're focused on, but there's a little more to it.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. So the War of the Worlds brouhaha resulted in an awful lot of fallout afterwards. Yeah.
The FCC, I think at the time briefly called the Mercury Theater radio terrorists.
Radio terrorists. Okay, I can see that.
Putting out this broadcast that scared so many people.
Did anybody actually die? Do you know?
No.
Were there
there's
heart
a lot
attacks? Were there?
Speaking of like what's true and what isn't true, and that issue kind of folds into this whole historical story, is that some people have gone back and said, well, where are all the deaths? Why weren't, if it was such a big instance of mass hysteria, nobody, killed themselves? Actually, I read about Pittsburgh. There was a report that a husband had to stop his wife from taking poison because she wanted to die that way, as opposed to be fried by the Martians. So, there was a genuine, thousands and thousands of people went nuts, right, and believed
jumped in cars, started running.
Yeah. Got their guns.
Desperate. Got their guns.
Fled their homes in fear. But after the fact, a lot of folks were saying, they really raised the bar on mass hysteria. They wanted to see, people jumping off cliffs, right? But you didn't get, there weren't a lot. Thank God, there weren't a lot of deaths out of it or anything like that. But there were thousands, upwards of 1 million people were surveyed afterwards, believed it on some level. Like you were saying, there was various levels. Some people fell hook, line, and sinker for the Martians. Some thought it was Russians.
Yeah, if you listen to it, and I don't know how many have actually heard it all the way through. I can see where if you're nodding off by the fire and all of a sudden you wake up, because they kept cutting away from an orchestral thing to reporters in the field and interviewing people who had, and all of these were actors, of course, but it looked like a television broadcast prior to TV. It seemed like a news.
It's interesting
broadcast.
That you say looked, right? Because we think about, especially, we look at that as like this instance of incredible naivete. How could people be? This was way back in '38, and people were naive, and that's the way we kind of dismiss it. But it's not that simple, right? Because, well, first of all, radio is an extremely vivid medium.
Oh, yes.
Right?
And in fact, because it's not visual, your imagination can conjure. So people were seeing.
You can see a Martian right here, right?
People were seeing, green men.
Right, but actually seeing something sometimes is less effective than just the imagination. And that's what radio can do as a medium. Right. But what, we're coming from, with this project we're working on, the Hear Yourself Think project, is issues of manipulation and misuse and abuse of mass media, right? And the world's example is perfect because whether, initially Orson Welles said it was complete innocence. Later he said, well, no, we were trying to kind of impugn the credibility of the radio because people were just swallowing anything that came through this new magic box, right? So he kind of changed his story over time as well. But what gave the Martian broadcast its power was that it was dressed up as a newscast. And if you talk to the people who fell into it, for instance, Steve Allen, from the Steve Allen show, confessed later
that he believed it.
That he was a teenager, but his family believed it. And he said, well, the reason is CBS News had never lied to us before. If they said Martians were coming down from the sky, they were coming, right? And they panicked and they fled their apartment, and then they got somewhere and they saw people just standing around normally, and they realized that they'd been duped. But that's what gave it power. It was, we interrupt this broadcast.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. We interrupt this broadcast, and it was interrupted a number of times. And I'm sorry, after a while, you start, you aren't sure. Even if you have some critical thinking abilities, you start getting maybe a little nervous. I'm not sure if I would have fallen for it or not. It's easy for us now to say we wouldn't have. But we're no different than people then. We're naive in our own ways. We haven't evolved all that much in 75 years.
Well, we were talking about, I was hanging posters for this event in Lawrenceville, and I went into a business, and the young lady let me hang a poster, and she said, this is about the Martian broadcast. My grandparents, they lived in Ligonier at the time, 100% believed it. We talked about it for years. Now, they didn't freak out, maybe because they were far enough away from the action. It was allegedly happened in New Jersey. But there was, it was interesting to talk to somebody who confirmed, no, we talked about it. They were right up front. They said it was on the news. Why wouldn't we believe it?
Exactly right. Well, now there it is. It was on the news. Why wouldn't we believe it? And that's why you're involved in this.
Correct.
Because there are parallels to be made about being hoodwinked by the news. It was on the news. I heard it on CBS. I saw it on Fox. I that, and how the dangers of manipulation and dispensing of misinformation, a.k.a. propaganda, whatever you want to call it, and to think that it ain't happening now is absurd. Mm-hmm. Of course it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I know what really hooks me about this story and what made me want to commemorate this anniversary and have this Halloween event around it is that reading all this is academic and it's very interesting, but I feel like I've experienced it. I know that it's true. I know that it's true. I've knocked on at least conservatively 100,000 doors, in southwestern Pennsylvania over the last 10 years, talking on various issues, and it's kind of on some level, you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about this incredible level of misinformation that you face out in the field because it's almost like you're, revealing people. But the fact is, at some point, you have to talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that when you knock on a door, if something's coming out of the,
what's called the media.
The media. The media.
You can tell he can't even say it. He has not a lot of respect. The media.
You're going to wade through that the rest of your night while you're knocking on doors talking about an issue. And that's a media-wide phenomenon, obviously. It's not, but our project, the Hear Yourself Think project, hearyourselfthink.org, is focused on the problem specifically, really, of right-wing media, like Fox, like Blanket, right-wing talk radio that's just out there on a mission to misinform, right?
We talk all the time on here about feeling, we talk about a divided America, red state, blue state, all this kind of thing. But truly, and we all have experienced it, that we are living in a country we might be living next door to nice people but they're living in another universe, and they think they have the right information.
Correct.
And I know they don't. They think I'm naive and being hoodwinked. I, of course, think the same of them. And I've talked about this for decades, I think now, about falling down the rabbit hole. You just don't, up is down, black is white.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. Okay, somebody's getting hoodwinked.
Right.
Somebody's getting hoodwinked.
Well, if you look, there have been, and I think when we talk about misinformation, that doesn't even do the problem justice, right? You touch on it when you say it's like living in a bizarro reality. It's like an alternate reality. Mm-hmm. When you look at outlets, it's been decades now since talk radio, since the vast majority, would you say 90% plus of
easily conservative,
right,
went conservative,
is right-wing conservative, and it's gotten crazier and crazier. The messaging coming out of that apparatus has gotten crazier and crazier. Fox News is still the largest, most watched cable news, network. 27 million people a week tune into Hannity and Limbaugh combined. Now, it's one thing for media in general to format for fear because people, media across the board, I'm talking all media, because it's become more about profit. It's become more like entertainment across the board.
Well, I was going to say it's entertainment.
Right.
And that's what people don't understand. Although wise heads like a Roger Ailes have realized that what we do here is we make something that looks like a news network, and we build news sets and we have anchors. But this is really a show about entertaining people. And entertainment is a broad definition. Hooking them. Mm-hmm. Hooking them. Making them wonder what's coming next. What are you going to say next? How are you going to... So I have often said, there's no doubt that talk radio is an entertainment medium. Mm-hmm. Rush Limbaugh knows that. And a lot of people who ply their trade in it would say, everybody knows I'm not a reporter. I'm just somebody with an opinion. But they also know dang well that they've got audiences hanging on their every word, giving them their marching orders.
Correct.
You even have a whole political party hanging on their very word.
That's why when we often talk about it as misinformation. Misinformation, though, to me implies that, well, Dave got a fact wrong, so somebody can come to Dave and say, let's correct that fact.
Yeah, misinformation is me saying Marty McFly did it yesterday.
And that can be corrected, right? And we can both be on the same essential playing field to correct that information.
Right.
This is deeper than misinformation. This is about narratives and the power of narratives.
And the repetition. Repeating these narratives, repeating them till they take on a life and a reality of their own. That's
what right-wing media does in a very direct way that media in general doesn't do. General media is about profits and more about entertainment, but in general they're not. It's not agenda-driven and narrative-driven in the way that right-wing media does. They know that if they can sell people on a specific narrative that panders to their ego, plays on their fear, manipulates resentments, once they hook them on that, then that's where you get this alternate universe that's created, where you can't even talk to somebody like as if we're both, on the third planet from the sun.
No, we don't agree on basic facts. I mean, we no longer agree on basic facts. And so everything you're saying about them, they would say about you. That you think mainstream media, that, by the way, those are their words. They've created whole vocabularies that we now speak. Mainstream media don't have an agenda. How naive are you? That's the liberal agenda. Right. That's what had to give rise to Fox News.
And that's an aggressive part of their narrative for sure. But here's the thing: if we're going to go to a scary place where it's just purely just purely relativistic, there is no truth, right? It's just whatever somebody chooses to believe. That's not what brought us to this point in history as humanity and as a civilization. We have to believe that there's not some perfect objective truth, but that it's meaningful to seek common truths, that we can't just suddenly decide that it's whatever you choose to believe on Tuesday. Right, that's whatever you want to believe, or whatever Rush Limbaugh says is factual. Right, it doesn't work that way. And now there's lots of studies, one after another, coming out now from Stanford and University of Maryland that have shown that folks who consume right-wing media, in particular Fox, are more misinformed than who use that as their primary source of information in quotes.
They got it wrong.
They get it wrong.
A lot.
And the more that they consume Fox, the more misinformed they are. Right. So if we still believe in some kind of search for objective answers in science and truth, you look at those things and you can see that folks are just being flat out misinformed, by these media sources.
With a purpose.
With a purpose, with an agenda. That's correct.
And that agenda is?
Well, let's look at. A lot of my experience came through the healthcare reform fight, right? So, the agenda was to stop healthcare reform from being passed at any cost, right? But you can't get, 100 insurance executives or people from the business community to come out who don't want it and sit down and say, well, we don't want it, and then that'll carry the day. You need a base of people who will do some of your work for you, get out there and carry your message. And that's, and by the time we did the healthcare reform fight, they had decades of right-wing media infrastructure. Talk radio had been, setting this narrative up for folks for decades that people were essentially bought into. And they pulled those folks out.
Yeah.
Based on a completely, those folks might have been, when they came out to those town halls and got aggressive and got in people's faces and belittled sick people, and they believed they were doing the right thing because in their narrative world,
they were saving
the
America
universe
from socialism. Yeah, right. They still are trying to.
They're still trying to do it. But unfortunately, their narrative was purely fictional. They might as well have been coming out and talking about the latest Hollywood movie, or
did you hear Martians invaded New Jersey?
Or did you hear? Thank you, precisely.
Okay, so speaking of the Martians invading New Jersey, can I read some of that?
Please do.
This blows me away. Let's set the historic. So 75 years ago, it puts us in 1938. 1938. Well, now that's interesting because 1938 was a scary time. There was a lot of upheaval in the world. Hitler was already on the march.
Correct.
People were seeing that threat. There was all kinds of stuff going on. America was trying to stay out of it. So it was a big isolationist movement that would play into, we don't want to get involved, whatever. All this is going on, and, media's reporting on it. A marvelous, incredible reporter at the time, and more of an opinion writer. She had a column, and
Yep.
I think she also was a reporter.
I believe she was.
I read a biography of her once. Dorothy Thompson, writing in the New York Herald. And she must have written that almost immediately after, a week after or something, after War of the Worlds had aired. And I'm not going to read it all, but this thing could be written.
Some of it's just incredible.
This piece, written in 1938, could be written right now.
About Fox News. Not to put too fine a point on it, right?
That's listen to how she perceived the Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater War of the Worlds and the consequent chaos that it created. And so this is in real time then. All unwittingly, Mr. Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air have made one of the most fascinating and important demonstrations of all time. They have proved that a few effective voices can so convince masses of people of a totally unreasonable, completely fantastic proposition as to create a nationwide panic. They have demonstrated more potently than any argument, demonstrated beyond a question of a doubt, the appalling dangers of popular demagoguery. They have cast a brilliant and cruel light upon the failure of popular education. They have proved how easy it is to start a mass delusion. They have uncovered the primeval fears lying under the thinnest surface of the so-called civilized man. And far from blaming Orson Welles, he ought to be given a congressional medal, for he and his theater have made a greater contribution to an understanding of Hitlerism, Mussolinism, Stalinism, anti-Semitism, and all other terrorisms of our times than all the words about them that have ever been written by reasonable men. Hitler managed to scare all Europe to its knees a month ago, but at least he had an army and an air force to back up his threats. Welles scared thousands and thousands into demoralization with nothing at all. And after it starts, she points out, eyewitnesses popped up. I saw people, people saw him. The reports became secondhand, thirdhand, fourthhand, became more and more credible. Nurses and doctors raced to their hospitals to be of service. National Guards troops reported to their armories. I mean, we were in a full-fledged war of extraordinary proportion. And she finishes with this. Just brilliant. The immediate moral is apparent if the whole incident is viewed in reason. No political body must ever, under any circumstances, obtain a monopoly of radio.
There you have it.
Hey there, out there in AM radio land and dribbling into FM. No political entity must ever hold a monopoly on radio. The second moral is that our popular and universal education is failing to train reason and logic. That's still true. The third is the popularization of science has led to gullibility and new superstitions rather than a really scientific attitude of mind. So there's Americans still being sort of anti-scientific, believing in the fantastic but not the provable. The fourth is the power of mass suggestion, the most potent force today, and the political demagogue is more powerful than all economic sources. If people can be frightened out of their wits by mythical men from Mars, then they can be frightened into fanaticism by the fear of commies, or convinced that America is in the hands of just 60 families, or aroused to revenge against any minority, or terrorized into subservience to leadership because of an imagined menace.
It's an amazing piece. And it's today. It's maybe
Absolutely.
maybe more so today.
You know, yeah, because this was one hour. This was one program, and then it went away. You have, with the likes of Fox, you have a 24/7 constant drumbeat, and we have seen the result. They have sown and worked hard at it for decades, creating mistrust in Americans. Mistrust, cynicism more than anything.
Yeah, and that serves them too. If they can get a bunch of people to believe outright a bill of goods about whatever issue,
Right.
that's one thing. But what it also has an effect of bleeding cynicism through the culture in general, because people don't know what to believe. And Dorothy Thompson uses an amazing phrase in there to close. Theatrical. What does she call it?
Theatrical demagogue. Wells made the scare to end all scares, the menace to end all menaces, the unreason to end all unreason, the perfect demonstration that the danger is not from Mars, but from, no, that doesn't make sense to me, from Mars.
The transcriber messed up.
But?
Yes, it's not from Mars, but from the theatrical demagogue.
Right. The danger ain't out there, something that doesn't exist. The danger's right here by that man that you listen to every night who you trust so much.
And Wells, I think was like 13 years later, when he had claimed innocence the next day because they were kind of in hot water.
Well, my bet is, knowing him, because he was an egomaniac, that he saw he would look a lot smarter if he would say, I intended to.
Once it was safe and it sounded,
Right.
But his claim was that he wanted it to be a warning on a level, that people shouldn't just trust everything that comes through the media, through the radio. Now, what I see is that Fox News and right-wing media has taken what should have been a cautionary tale, right, a cautionary example of mixing fiction with news formatting, right, dressing fiction up as news. Should be, as Dorothy Thompson said, this is cautionary. And they took that as a blueprint.
That's right.
As a blueprint.
They absolutely did.
And that's what we're living in. And that, I think it's the biggest piece. I think it's maybe why I want to work on this issue, and what Hear Yourself Think is all about, is this is the biggest thing that people are not seeing as what's really controlling and holding us back, this media issue.
Okay, so let me get a break out of the way. We'll come back. I want to talk more about this media issue. I want to talk about the group that now is taking up your time, HearYourselfThinkProject.org.
Yeah. HearYourselfThink.org.
Oh, HearYourselfThink.org. And this event, the commemoration next week at the Brillobox, is a event that Hear Yourself Think is putting together. So let's talk more with David Ninehouser, but first this.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen live after this.
It's here. Attention, everyone. Download the brand new CP Haps app and find out what's going on in Pittsburgh. Text events to 77948 to download now and to be registered to win tickets to the Pittsburgh versus Buffalo at Heinz Field. Or go to your app store to download. The CP Haps app, brought to you by Pittsburgh City Paper.
This is Les Ludwig, an independent candidate for mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. I ask for your vote on November 5th, and here's why. Some candidates play politics. I stand for a secure position in regards to fracking, one that's based on my background as a food technologist and opportunities that were presented in my lifetime in the dairy industry when I was a food chemist for the United States Army in Washington, D.C., and the dairy products literally stunk. Someone had to go ahead and take a stand. I did the chemistry, and I stood tall. What are we doing here with fracking? morning. We have a fight between money and public safety. No one has defined clearly where the danger level is in the distance from the wells. Until we take the moratorium for 3 years and find out what that answer is, I have to stand on the side of public health, not on the side of $500 million of money. It's a mistake, because when we poison our water, we literally sentence ourselves to big trouble. I ask you for your vote and the question of standing tall when it comes to making a decision about fracking. Let's keep Allegheny County and its citizens safe. I thank you.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Oh, we're back?
Yes.
We are! I'm back with David Ninehouser, who is the, I don't know, do you have a title with Hear Yourself Think?
Yeah, you can. What do you say? What do you think it should be?
The Grand Poobah?
There you go.
Okay,
we'll go with that.
the Grand Poobah of Hear Yourself Think.
Director.
Okay, the director of. All right, so what kind of things will you be, how are you going to get your message out? I mean, obviously this event is one way to start.
Here's some. Well, yeah, the event is a vehicle to get our message out. We feel like, just as we talked about today with the War of the Worlds historical example, sometimes it's hard to talk to folks. Having that historical example to look back on is really powerful, because when you're immersed in something, it's hard for folks to see it. How they're being influenced, right, and the impact that something's having on their culture and their life.
So at the event next week, say again, it's on, what's the date?
Here, you want to see the poster?
Yeah, let's see the poster.
Okay, so at the Brillobox a week from today.
Brillobox a week from today, and are you going to replay the? So how's it going to work?
Actually, what we're going to do is we will be summoning forth the spirit of Orson Welles to tell the tale of the War of the Worlds event and deliver a warning to the living, right? Okay. So there will be some, there'll be some of the original broadcast, and there's lots of fun prizes, including a CD, wrapped new CD of the original broadcast that somebody will take home and win, and we've got lots of groups involved, but so it's going to be fun, but it's going to be a fun event. But the Hear Yourself Think project, is seeking these ways to get for folks to kind of grasp this issue, right, and get their heads around it and realize what we're dealing with, and take it on a grassroots level.
Okay,
right?
So what would be the ultimate purpose? You want to wake enough people up, but then what do you want them to do?
I think here's so there's, we're not obviously the only folks who've noticed this, right? There's lots of great groups out there working on it, like David Brock with Media Matters, right? He does a lot of debunking and fact-checking, and catalogs instances of right-wing misinformation, and that's great, and we use that stuff as a resource all the time. But our, my experience in particular comes from the grassroots. Knocking on so many doors, seeing how this affects people really on a grassroots level. You can talk to folks, and they'll hear you, but while you're talking to them at the door, they got Fox on. And as soon as you shut the door and you're done having your conversation, and they've agreed with you even, they're back in front of that influence, right? And we want to boil down this media issue, this right-wing media issue, to a couple of very important points to help us kind of identify what it's really doing. Number one, we have to agree that it's a toxic influence in our communities and our culture.
Without a doubt. I mean, if you look at how awful and divided we are, and how everybody's in each other's face and screaming and yelling, we can, I would think, just thank cable news in general for creating the crossfire thing that's back now. Everybody just sits and screams at each other.
And it's by design. Right-wing media wants it that way.
No, because that's what people are drawn to. No one's drawn to a bunch of reasonable people sitting around having a conversation. If you want to attract a crowd, you got to create a...
And that's great for ratings, right?
That's what it's about.
But for the right wing, it's also about a political agenda, and we've seen that with the government shutdown.
Yes.
Right? They have this big narrative in their heads about hey, let's kill the monster of government. Then they kill it, and then they say, oh no, well, let's give this piece back and give that piece back, because it was this big narrative of it was Godzilla and let's slay the dragon, right? But then, you mean government
actually does
these things for veterans, and it does these things. Well, so it's this false narrative is dangerous, right? Because it's taken hold, and so it's a toxic influence. We want folks to recognize that it is that, and how it functions in our daily lives. I'll give you an example. My mother-in-law, she goes to the area agency on aging knitting circle, right? Which is great, right? By the way, it's a government-funded, program that she took up with, and she was in this little knitting circle, and it was completely dominated by 2 or 3 ladies, or like 15 ladies there, who were Fox News people. Right, and it's essentially a bullying dynamic, and this helped us realize. What she went through helped us realize how to boil this down. There are millions of people out there who are like an untapped resource who've just had it up to here with this stuff.
But they don't speak out.
Right, and it's a bully. If it's in its simplest form, this is about standing up to bullies. Because right-wing media, like Rush Limbaugh, like Bill O'Reilly, like Hannity, model bullying behavior. And people go into their communities, into their interactions, and they carry forth with that kind of attitude, that messaging, which essentially silences reasonable voices.
Right.
So the work that groups like Media Matters, they're doing kind of more on the academic level, is great and a great resource. What we need to do is activate people in their circles to identify this as a toxic influence and take it on.
But you also need to be able to, and then another big thing is, because these interactions happen on a one-on-one, your mom's sitting in a knitting circle and these 2 certain ladies, squawking and screaming about what's really going on in the world. And the other ladies maybe aren't agreeing with them, but they don't feel they have the same. And so they aren't empowered to take them on, nor do they maybe feel as passionate. So that, I don't know how you build up that.
Here's the good news, right? And here's what happened in that story with my mom-in-law. Is we talked to her and we coached her and we said, you can't just go day in, day out and let
these
and let them dominate this situation. And we told her what you said. There's all these other ladies. Do you think they agree? She says, I don't think they do, but they don't want to say anything. Well, it crossed a line one day. They said something about
Obama's a Muslim.
No, Gabby Giffords. Right now, this was the message of the day through the right-wing media. I'd heard it everywhere. I listened to this stuff, God. And it was, she's getting too much attention. Why doesn't she just sit down? You remember that, right? They were pushing that for a while. They're trying to discredit the messenger and so to avoid the subject.
Right.
And so
just because she almost got killed,
why did she ever? So that was essentially what one of the ladies said, sitting there knitting, and said, why doesn't this prima donna Gabby Giffords? She's had her say something just hideous, right? And it just clicked for my mom-in-law, and she said, she spoke up at that point, and said, I don't understand how you could possibly say something like that. And she kind of approached it on a moral level. It wasn't about debunking, it was just on a more. How could you be so heartless to say something like that? And the dynamic in that room changed over days, right? The other ladies rallied around.
Your mother-in-law.
There was like a palpable shift, right? So it's just, we think we get out of high school, we never do, right? The same bullying dynamics exist through life.
It's so true.
So that we need to encourage people to do simple things. And this is Bullying Awareness Month, by the way, in October.
Is it really?
Yeah. So think about that in the context of right-wing media and how it encourages bullying and how it just really takes 1 or 2 voices in a circumstance who have the guts to stand up and say, that's not acceptable here. Let's talk about our grandkids. Let's talk about something else. It doesn't have to be about politics, right? But just to dispel that negativity.
And to let the bullies know, we are not enjoying this. So, shutting them up if nothing else. Not if you don't feel like arguing. Just saying, this is, I don't agree with what you're saying, and I don't know that all the other ladies here do either. So why don't we just talk about something else?
And that's what she was able to do. And it empowered her. She felt great.
I bet. So you know what? We talk all the time about leadership. There's a paucity, a dearth of leadership, and where are the leaders? Well, in your own little circle. I mean, it takes a little, nothing gets done without you doing something that you're a little afraid to do. Mm-hmm. But once you do, as your mother-in-law found out, it's empowering. And you may be more inclined to do it again. You don't have to get ugly. You don't have to get nasty. But you can let these people know that you don't agree or you don't approve or have you no shame.
Absolutely.
Or whatever.
It makes a difference. And it made a difference in that dynamic and for my mother-in-law's self-esteem. Because this was an issue her whole life, about feeling like I can't speak up.
Well, it's a very female thing, too, and women of a certain age, that's right. Women aren't supposed to. So hear yourself think. Obviously, the name comes from the cacophony of all of this stupidity, of which, and I have labored in the vineyard of talk radio most of my working life. Yeah.
You've seen it.
I've seen it. I've lived it. I've heard it. It has not been good for my own health. It's true.
Mine either.
No, it's just not good.
And that's why this campaign is important for me, because I was, I don't want to fight anymore, right? I don't want to be fighting back and forth about a bunch of nonsense. I just want to cut to the chase. Here's what's going on. Let's really identify the problem and be real about what the problem is. Get out of the false equivalency, that it's all the same somehow, because it isn't. It just isn't. The kind of behavior and messaging that they're encouraging on the right wing is genuinely damaging. It's fun. You can disagree with the president. You can disagree with the policy. But it should be based on facts, right? It shouldn't be based on some fantasy narrative, and it shouldn't reach a degree of incivility and ugliness that poisons relationships and poisons the culture.
Exactly right. I'm so glad you're doing this stuff. So maybe you'll show up at Brillobox on the 29th? I keep blanking on the
30th.
30th.
I'm sorry. That's a week from today.
30th.
Yeah, come on out to the Brillobox. We're encouraging costumes, right? There's going to be it's a commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the War of the Worlds Martian broadcast. It's on the exact date.
That's a great way to hook this whole thing. Good for you. That's clever and it's smart because, as Dorothy Thompson showed us, it is emblematic of sort of where we are now, and on a constant basis.
We thought it was going to be kind of a heavy conversation to a certain extent, but the party is pure fun. It's going to be the ghost of Orson Welles will be there, but it'll be fun. It's not going to be preachy or anything like that.
Okay,
right?
It's really fun.
It's
fun.
It's a costume party. Come on out as a Martian or a zombie or anything you want. There's prizes and games and fun and Martians.
For anyone who doesn't know where the Brillobox is, it's in Lawrenceville.
It's in Lawrenceville on Penn. Right?
On Penn.
You
can't miss it. It's up.
Penn and Maine.
Yeah.
Sort of Penn and Maine-ish. Yeah. Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
That's Maine right there as you come from the Strip? Is that Maine?
No. That's
No.
Penn. Maine is like coming.
Look it up. There's lots of information around the Brillobox.
Right
and Ray, who knows everything and lives in Lawrenceville, has written the venue, the Brillobox, was originally a bar called Ninehousers.
It's all come full circle. You know what? I knew that, and in planning this event, I kind of, I hadn't really thought about it, but that was my uncle's.
Was it?
Yeah.
He spelled his name differently?
No, I think Ray spelled it.
Oh, Ray spelled it.
Yeah.
Ray spelled it as like nine.
My uncle, gosh, I haven't had touch with my dad, but I think my Uncle Jimmy's place, Jim Ninehouser, and it was a big deal in the family because they filmed a Iron City commercial there once, and that was family legend. Yeah.
Well, that's weird. Everything comes around, full circle. Thank you very much, Dave Ninehouser. Good luck with this. HearYourselfThink.org if you want to perhaps get involved. This seems to be one of those issues of our time that is really worth working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn, very much.
Okay, we're taking a break, and when we come back, we will be talking public transit, buses downtown. Some people say they're going away.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Come to Little's for all of your back-to-school needs. Little's has everything for all ages to stay in style for this upcoming school season. Check out the large selection from Doc Marten, Steve Madden, UGG, Clarks, Lely Kelly, New Balance, and much, much more. Don't forget to come visit this season's colorful handbag selection as well. Little Shoes, Pittsburgh's largest family shoe store, 5850 Forbes Avenue in Squirrel Hill.
Hi, I'm LeVar Burton, and I'm proud to be a book person. How do I choose a book? Sometimes it's the cover, sometimes it's the title. I guess I'm pretty visual. If a book's really impressing me and the writing is really good, I will peek and see what the last paragraph is, because the endings of books should rock you. I am a book person, and if you're a book person too, read to a child and spark a lifetime of ambition. Join me at bookpeopleunite.org because reading is fundamental. A public service announcement brought to you by Reading is Fundamental, Library of Congress, and the Ad Council.
This is the sound of a flat-screen television hurled off a building. Now the new bike your kid wants. These are the things you could have, all cast into oblivion. Because when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have bought with it. Use Energy Star light bulbs and appliances, and you could save hundreds of dollars a year. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Okie doke, we are back. Helen, come on. We're back. This is Helen Gerhardt's been here before too, because she's another one of those troublemaking activist types who is constantly up to something. Actually, you were on the show. You've been on the show in regard to mass transit, but you've also were on the show as a Iraq War veteran.
Yes,
right.
That's
Those
right.
are the So you
two hats.
Two hats. It's a busy woman. She fights wars, and she gets back from wars, and then fights more wars. I don't know which ones are more.
Please glorify me, yes. No,
it's the U.S. government trained you to be a warrior, and be a warrior.
Well, I will say being in Iraq really did, that was the beginning of my political activism, because I saw how people were rolled over, and I see people being thrown under the bus that need the bus really badly right now. So,
your position as community organizer for Pittsburghers for Public Transit, and people who take the bus, and I am one, although I have alternative. I mean, if I don't take the bus, I do have a vehicle. I don't know what percentage of bus riders.
About 30% of people in Pittsburgh don't
have a car.
Don't have a car, right? And so many of the people that I work with every day out on the bus stops and on the buses really don't have the choice. They work incredibly hard, 2 or 3 jobs, often part-time jobs, that pay below living wage and don't have health benefits. So they have to travel all over the city and make all kinds of connections. And of course, downtown is the central connective hub for the entire system for the county.
So to get to one of their 3 jobs, they have to take a bus down here, connect, make a transfer. And by the way, it's not cheap. I don't think it's cheap. It blows my mind.
For highest fares in the country. And so if because people have to travel between all these different zones all over it's no exaggeration to say that some people spend 2 hours each way, so about 4 hours commuting, and they have to transfer numerous times. If there's a significant gap in between one job and the next, then they have to pay another $350 to go from one zone to the other. So costs indeed do rack up.
And if they're not making more than $350 an hour, I mean, come on.
What it comes out to is basically rents and transit costs and parking costs, car costs. Working people have all these ways that their hard work is extracted for the wealth of a very few. So, what is being made on parking in the city is phenomenal. The city is partly dependent on transit. On parking revenues, and so there's such a understandable strain, a tension between, those who are trying desperately to keep us solvent. We're in Act 47, so leaders are having to make really difficult decisions, but so many times it's working people that bear the main impacts. And if you look at who's controlling the conversation right now. If you stand in the middle of Smithfield, the not yet so grand boulevard.
Oh yes, it's being re-envisioned as a grand boulevard, and we've talked. I mean, I've talked about that. But part of making it a grand boulevard is getting all the riffraff at the bus stops out off the sidewalks.
There's a very important voice in this conversation. Like in that article, you didn't see riders and drivers quoted. But here's one quote by Bill Rudolph, who was very enthusiastic about this vision. It could be the icing on the cake. A street like that in the middle of downtown could take it to a whole new level. Let them eat cake, right? But Bill Rudolph has 2 hats, 2 angles of perspective. He serves the city of Pittsburgh as vice chairman of the board of directors of the URA.
And he also owns one of the big buildings on Smithfield.
He owns a lot more than just one big building. He owns 610, which is...
I think the Oliver Building he owns.
He owns... Oh, just wait till I get to that part.
Okay.
Okay, so he owns 610, which is the home to Fragasso Financial Advisors. Flaherty and O'Hara Attorneys at Law, which is a boutique firm that specializes in liquor license. They serve a lot of the big hotels around here. And Brooks Brothers, as well as the Carnegie Library. You look to the right, if you're looking down towards Smithfield, and you see the old location of, it's the former Gimbel's building.
Yes.
It housed Office Depot. So there's a sweetheart deal that's in the balance right now with another clothier. And having those people in front of the building is not really good for making such a sweetheart
They're thinking
deal.
of what, putting a Marshalls or something like that. I mean, whatever. But so you're saying, so this guy, who, by the way, I know, who owns a ton of these buildings
and a lot of parking.
And a lot of
There's
parking.
a new,
also sits on the, what did you say? The URA?
Urban
Redevelopment Authority.
So that's the,
It would
part of
seem
our
to be a
government.
conflict, but I suppose the way they look at it is, on the Urban Redevelopment Authority, we should have people who know urban
but when there's
realty
when they're actually making direct profit. So back in 2012, the mayor announced that the URA board voted on redevelopment of the former Saks Fifth Avenue property, 600 spaces for car-loving, door-to-door customers. And McKnight Realty directly profits from that. They own that. So
that's Rudolph.
That seems like a pretty clear conflict of interest.
Okay, so, but, all right. So what else is new? Now, what I want to know is this going to, so you got Peduto on board with Fitzgerald.
I
were
respect
surprised.
Bill Peduto's record.
But you think he's wrong on this?
I think we need to be all in on this conversation. I very much respect Bill's being out there in the community all the time, listening to people, respecting their needs. He has campaigned on community process that he's shown in the past. So he needs to carry forward with that now. He has our support in that. But, there's a meeting this Saturday. We all need to come together from out of our silos, from out of our special interests. We need to understand the system a lot better. City Transportation Planner Patrick Roberts will be giving an overview of our transportation system and how public transit fits within that. ATU Executive Board Brian Shane, that's the Amalgamated Transit Union. He's been a bus driver for many years and in the leadership. He's going to talk about Connect 09. Another example of when an outside company, a consultant, was hired to plan for our very specific circumstances and topography and human communities here in Pittsburgh with not so great results, partly because the public process that was carried out was pro forma. So that there were lots of public meetings, but what I'm hearing again from riders and from drivers who know the system best, their input, their expertise, their knowledge of the day-to-day functioning of the system was pretty much ignored.
Disregarded. I mean, so they have these public forums where you can come and speak, but you get the impression that it's just, as you said, pro forma. We got to do this. We already know what we're going to do.
That's what happens all too.
I always suspect that that's generally what's going on.
It's not always that way, and so I am hopeful. There are many members who campaigned. Our organization does not endorse any candidate. What we do is we try to feature the good positions and then the actions of those candidates. I myself, on my own time, I campaigned for Bill Peduto. Couldn't do that as part of my job, but I really believed in that record. And because I persuaded, I persuaded a lot of people to vote for him. Therefore, I think it's my responsibility to hold him to account. I respect him. I feel that we need to be in good conversation. I trust that he will listen. There's a learning curve for every single politician that actually practices service to the community. And I think it is a disservice on our part to have a blanket cynicism and say that every politician is going to be the same. I think they are caught within a system that puts really incredible pressures on them to behave in certain ways because of our whole campaign finance structure.
Oh, sure.
So we need to inform ourselves, not speak from a selfish, narrow interest. Work with our community members, strive to understand each other across barriers of race and class and privilege, and help each other actually plan for the common good.
You know, I forget who said it, but I think it was somebody who, I don't think it was Kevin McMahon, but it was somebody higher up at the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. And he said something like 90% of our employees take the bus to work down here, but he was in favor of, including himself, we're in favor of getting the buses out of the downtown. I mean,
the embassy suites that are going into the Oliver building, they want to have valet service, door-to-door valet. They want to have valet service, and that would it would require elimination of the bus lane. So Fitzgerald, I was on the radio with him, and he was saying that we can't afford a door-to-door service. And he is talking about people who work so hard all the time, and they walk in all kinds of weather.
Yeah,
I couldn't afford to fix my car for a large part of this year. So from March until about 3 weeks ago, I was all bus and bike. And I loved it. I loved the exercise. Yes, indeed, we need to reconfigure the routes. We need to not have too many bus stops. But there needs to be real input by drivers and riders. This is a public system that they pay taxes for, and they should have a real say, a place at the planning table. When you look at the stakeholders group.
On the Port Authority Board, how many just plain old people are there on there? Riders?
I would say John Tague, and that's partly because John Tague is part of the Committee for Accessible Transit. He's a longtime transit advocate. We lobbied to Vlahovic. There was a law this summer, Act 700. I'm sorry, it was Senate Bill 700. It's now Act 78. And it reconfigured the way that the Port Authority Board is appointed by various stakeholders. So now County Executive Fitzgerald has 6 appointments. When we met with Vlahovic, he was very much part of the writing of that bill. There are 4 groups that were chosen to pick a pool for 2 of those appointments by County by the County Executive. So we lobbied to have the Committee for Accessible Transit be one of those organizations that would pick that slate of possible appointees. And John Tague was chosen. He was one of 2 put forward by the Committee for Accessible Transit. The other is Janet Evans, who will be speaking for riders for the Committee for Accessible Transit. She's on the Housing Authority. So she will be the 3rd speaker at our meeting this Saturday from 12 to 2. So there's actually 2 chances for people to come and have their voices heard from 10 to 11:30, which is our general membership meeting where we're developing.
And where is this? Where?
It's at the USW building, 60 Boulevard of the Allies. So we'll be planning our campaign, how to really make our voices heard in an effective, thoughtful, responsible way, but not allowing us to be left out of the planning, not allowing us to be off the table. Then from 12 to 2, Patrick Roberts, the transportation planner, Brian Shane for the Amalgamated Transit Union, and Janet Evans will be speaking. Then there'll be an hour of all these people coming from environmental groups, from social service agencies, from small businesses and medium-sized businesses, from social justice advocates. All kinds of organizations have committed to be there and together consider what are our priorities for this public transit system that connects us across all these barriers. This is the key to survival for so many of us and to the vitality and the equity of this city.
I was at an event last night for an incredible organization, Just Harvest, that deals with social justice issues around food and poverty. And I met a woman who her son can't get to college anymore. They live in, where I forget, but she's told me Dravosburg or something. And the bus that he can't afford to live on campus, so he'd been taking the bus to Pitt. He's a senior. Her car has now gone kaplooey, and he can't get to school.
Yes, So yes, the system is under such strain, and there have been so many cuts that affect so many people like that. As well as think about the students at the Community College of Allegheny. They are working many of these are working kids
Oh, yeah.
who are going into working jobs, and they don't have a free pass.
No.
And they have 4 different campuses that they have to travel between to be able to complete the requirements for their degree. Do you know how many times on the bus that is?
No, it's amazing.
And so they have to walk up hills in icy weather. I mean, one thing that our leaders need to really remember is that access to health care, to food, there are food deserts that Peduto has been trying to address. If we don't pay attention to the needs of people for whom walking is a real challenge, just a few blocks. One of our members is Pastor Ann Miller. She is vision impaired, and she has a voice. She came to meet with Dan Gilman, who is Bill Peduto's chief of staff, and she expressed herself so well. She said, you have a dog in this fight. City and county need to work together to make this to showcase a new direction. As Bill Peduto comes into office, he can be an example to the world of truly inclusive process, of substantive change from the Ravenstall administration, which made this sweetheart deal with McKnight Realties. They voted in that incredible parking garage that is making that person on that board that voted for it one of 5 people. Profit. They need to reassure the voters by action that I believe they can carry out with style and justice and with real engagement of the public that believed in him.
Well, this is going to be a subject that is going to be hot and heavy for some time. Kathy writes, I think we would be better served with no cars in the center of the city than no buses.
So no, I'm not saying no cars in the middle of the city. We are a multimodal system. And what we have to be doing is looking at data. I am all for Peduto's emphasis on data-driven. But the thing is, but people's experience and drivers' expertise, that's part of the data. So recently there were a bunch of bus stops trimmed, and it needed to happen. There were too many.
Yes.
But it was based on counts, just on counts. So let's say you have, and I shouldn't say just on counts, but that was a big part of the weighting of the decisions. So if you have 2 stops, and one's at a major intersection where, let's say, you have 20 people get on the bus an hour, and then one is in front of Giant Eagle, and you only have 15 people get on an hour. There were quite a few stops that were cut from in front of Giant Eagles.
No, but people have bags.
Yes, you have all these people. And like in Troy Hill, incredibly transit-dependent community, lots of elders. The Hill District, that's where our other chapter is. Those are the 2 main places we have community chapters, as well as our general membership from all over the county. So they, until recently, the Hill was very dependent to get food by the bus. They had to travel to Giant Eagles.
Yeah.
Right, and so the connective hub of downtown is so crucial for those basic needs that they need to be directly listened to. And the riders need not to be thinking just about their stop, but about the larger system that they're part of. It means if we're going to have a democracy, we have to really inform ourselves. We have to look at all the communities that we're connected to, that we're interdependent with. We need to look at all the hard decisions that have to be made as a community together for our common purposes. So, and to speak out at meetings like this. And then we're going to be presenting our priorities, our concerns, our ideas in documents to Bill Peduto and to Rich Fitzgerald to hallmark that new era. As Bill Peduto comes in as mayor, he can show himself to really be a people's mayor.
Helen Gerhardt, community organizer for Pittsburghers for Public Transit. The meeting again that everybody is invited to is this Saturday.
It is. There's going to be a series of 4 meetings because this is so important and we're having such incredible response. So the first one, from 10 to 11:30, that's our general membership meeting where we're planning our campaign.
Okay.
Then from 12 to 2, that's for everybody, even if you're never interested in being a member.
Okay.
That's where Patrick Roberts, the transportation planner, is speaking. The Amalgamated Transit Union, Brian Shane, representative, is speaking, and Janet Evans. Then we'll put
get
out
together and brainstorm
from all those different silos.
All right.
Then there are 3 sessions November 2nd, we'll focus from 12 to 2, we'll focus on economic health. So we'll have speakers that are kind of, who have real experience in that. We'll talk about the difference between private transit systems and public, and how all the data shows how much it is in the public interest and the economy's interest. On November 9th, we'll be talking about environmental and human health. So we'll have a representative from the Breathe Project with the Heinz Foundations speaking about air quality, integrated multimodal transportation, and health benefits of exercise and social connection. And then on November 16th from 12 to 2, we will be focusing on social and political equity. So the consideration of access to democratic engagement, the polls, political action, culture, recreation, parks, volunteering, neighborhood groups.
Good God. All right. They got a lot of stuff to talk about, and they want you involved. This is exactly what the powers that be never want to happen, which is the grassroots getting up, getting organized, and becoming a force to be reckoned with, just like the deep-pocketed guys that own all the buildings. So if you're at all interested or see that this is an issue that is important to Pittsburgh and consequently to you, get involved. You have a website?
Pittsburghforpublictransit.org. Somebody snatched up our Pittsburghers for public transit.
Okay.
So it's Pittsburghforpublictransit.org.
Okay. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for joining us today. Tomorrow, Tom Sokolowski will be in. Okay? Toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.